السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. So inshallah, if anybody is online and if they can confirm that my voice is audible. I just want to make sure before we start. Jazakallah khair. So inshallah, we'll go ahead and start. So, alhamdulillah, for those of you who have been following this, we're now at our penultimate scene of the life of the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. And in the last 2 days, we went through the battles of Badr, Uhud, and Khandaq. So now we're going to go into a second stage, or the second last stage of the life of the Prophet ﷺ. If you remember from yesterday, the Battle of Ahzab or Battle of Khandaq was a very, very difficult battle of the Muslims. They had 10,000 people that had sieged the city of Medina, and the companions had dug a trench in order to stop them. And then they were double-crossed by a Jewish tribe that was supposed to be their ally. But alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them victory through that, and then they moved forward. Now, post Khandaq, there were a couple of incidences that happened in the life of the Prophet. Again, we're not going to go into too much detail, although every single incident is a story in of itself. But one of the famous incidents that happened was with regards to a man named Thumama, who eventually becomes Muslim. He is a leader of one of the surrounding tribes. And now the Quraysh, they're not able to directly attack the Prophet, but they're still trying to hurt him through whatever avenues they have. So Thumama is a warrior of the Arab tribes, and he tries to come to the outskirts of Medina, and he's captured. He comes with the intention of harming the Prophet, and then he's tied to one of the pillars of Masjid al-Nabawi. And he's tied there for 3 days. And the Prophet talks to him every day. He comes to him and he speaks to him. And then he says, what do you expect of me? And he says, if you leave me, I'll be a grateful man. So for the 3 days, he watches Muslims as a prisoner. And then on the third day, the Prophet says, let him go. So he's freed, he goes back, and then he takes a bath, a ritual bath, comes back, and he declares his shahada. He says, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. So seeing the character of the Muslims, seeing the reality of the Muslims, he becomes Muslim. So that was one incident. The name of the Sahabi is Thumama, radiallahu anhu. Right, so that's one incident. Another incident happens, this is the famous incident of the whale. The Prophet sends a platoon, which is led by Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah, radiallahu anhu, and they are basically out, Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah, radiallahu anhu. So they're out with a few hundred men, and then they end up going by the sea. And they're out for so long that all their supplies run out, right? All the supplies run out, and they're almost to a point of starvation. And then miraculously, an animal from the sea, specifically a whale, is found, and they're able to eat off of that. So that's another famous incident that happens. Then in one of the battles that happens, again, these are smaller battles, but there's a tribe of the Battle of Mustaqliq, and this is where Juwayriyah radiallahu anhu is found from within the people of that tribe, and she becomes an Ummahat al-Mu'mineen. She gets married. Ustad Faisal had covered this in detail, the incident of the marriage of Juwayriyah radiallahu anhu. The other incident that happens is the incident of the marriage of the Prophet to Zainab bin Jahsh radiallahu anha. Now, Zainab radiallahu anha is the wife of Zayd bin Haritha, the adopted son of the Prophet. And then he divorces her, and then the Prophet eventually marries her. Now, during this time, if you remember the name of the hypocrite, Abdullah ibn Ubay, he's still continuing to try to harm the Prophet in any way he can, his reputation and the mission of Islam. So one of the things that they object to is that the Prophet married a former wife of his adopted son, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals the ayah indicating that the adopted sons are not your real sons, they're your brothers in faith, so you cannot give them your name. So before he used to be known as Zayd bin Muhammad, then he is now given the title of original father's name, which is Zayd bin Haritha. The other incident that happens is the incident of slander, and this is a long, very, very painful incident, also known as the incident of Ifk, where Aisha radiallahu anhu, as a caravan is coming back, she's left behind, and another Sahabi accidentally left behind. So she's searching for something and she's left behind, linking Aisha radiallahu anhu and this noble Sahabi who found her. And then, it's a long incident where she really, really becomes very depressed and suffers because of this lie onto her. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finally clears her of this slander. So these are a couple of these incidents that happened post Khandaq. But then we move on to one of the most important next chapters, which is the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Trying to look for my cloud already. Give me 1 second. Okay, so the next thing that happens is the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Now, Hudaybiyah is an amazing incident, right? So how does it begin with? It begins with a dream. The Prophet ﷺ has a dream that he is going to perform Umrah. So he tells the Sahaba that this is my dream, and inshallah we're going to fulfill that. And the Prophet ﷺ gathers 1,500 Sahaba, and along with Salama radiallahu ta'ala anha, he sets on for Umrah, right? So they have no intention to fight. Of course, Makkah is still within the governance of the Quraysh. So the Prophet ﷺ goes on with 15 Sahaba. They're not armed. All they have is one sword, and those swords are sheathed, right? So they reach a place called Dhul Hulayfa, and they change into their ihram, and then now they're going to Makkah al-Mukarramah. Now, as they're going, and they're in ihram, mind you, so they're not really in any condition or mindset of fighting. So the Quraysh find this out, and they obviously don't want the Muslims to just barge in and do Umrah. So they send Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu with 200 horsemen, right? So the Prophet ﷺ avoids Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu completely. He takes a different route and then goes pretty much bypasses them. Then Khalid bin Walid returns and says to the Quraysh that, okay, they've escaped. So as they're going in a place called Hudaybiyah, right before Hudaybiyah, the Prophet ﷺ's camel stops, right? It's not a stubborn camel, it's a very, very mild camel, but it stops. And that's the comment the Prophet ﷺ makes, is the one who stopped the elephants is the one who stops my camel right now. So that is, they go to a valley, or they go to a place called Hudaybiyah, and there's the well over there, and that well is dry. So the Prophet ﷺ, the Muslims are looking for water. The Prophet ﷺ takes an arrow and puts a quiver of the arrow into the well, and then water gushes out. Again, it's a miracle, and the Muslims are able to benefit from that water. So they are at Hudaybiyah, and at this point is where the negotiation takes place, right? Hudaybiyah. So the Quraysh, they absolutely don't want the Muslims to come in and do Umrah. So they send a number of delegations to the Prophet ﷺ, one by one, and this is basically individual men coming in and talking to the Prophet ﷺ. So finally, there's a man who eventually becomes Muslim. His name is Urwa bin Mas'ud. And Urwa bin Mas'ud, he goes and he's talking to the Prophet ﷺ, and he's basically telling him, listen, what you're doing is wrong. Eventually, the new gang that you've made of these Ansar and these people, they will eventually abandon you, and then the Quraysh are going to get to you. So Abu Bakr is listening to all of this, and he gets very angry at his suggestion. He says, "Do you think the people are going to leave the Prophet?" And then as he's talking, he's touching the beard of the Prophet. So another Sahabi, Sayyidina Bughayr, he knocks his hand and he says, "Keep your hand away from the beard of the Prophet." So Urwa is watching this, right? Urwa is watching this. He's having a discussion, and he's amazed at the loyalty and at the decorum and absolute admiration of the companions for the Prophet. So he goes back to the Quraysh, and he makes this, he makes this iconic statement. He says, "Listen, O men, O people of Quraysh, I have been to the courts of kings. I have been to the court of the Caesar, the Herakl. I've been to the court of the Khusros, the Azim, the leader of Persia. I've been to the courts of Negus, and I have never in my life seen any person who's revered by their people like Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam." He says, if he makes ablution, they don't let the drops of that ablution drop on the ground. And if he spits somewhere, they try to catch that spit and put it on their body as a barakah. And if he speaks, they listen to him. They're absolutely silent in awe and in respect. He says, you are not going to be able to defeat this army. Let him, they're coming in peace. Let him come and do whatever you want, whatever they want. And that's my suggestion to you. The rest is up to you. So the Quraysh, of course, they're unrelenting. They really don't want this to happen because it's a matter of their honor, right? They don't want the Muslims to just come in and do the Umrah. So Prophet finally decides that he's going to send Umar radiallahu anhu to negotiate on his behalf, saying that their intention is not to fight, just to come and do Umrah. Umar radiallahu anhu says, Ya Rasulullah, if you send me, number one, my relationship with the Quraysh is not that great, right? Number two, my tribe is also not influential. So instead of me, why don't you send Uthman radiallahu anhu? And he's got better relationships, and he is related to Abu Sufyan because he's from the same tribe of Banu Umayyah, so he might have better chances. So the Prophet sends Uthman, and he goes and he talks to the people, he talks to the Quraysh, he says, listen, this is our intention, we're not here to fight, we're not here to do any battle, all we need to do is make Umrah and go back. And there when Uthman comes, the Muslims who are still in Makkah, they get very excited when he sees them, and then he gives them the glad tidings. He says, wait, and eventually, this deen is going to flourish, and this deen is going to, we're going to capture Makkah eventually. So the Quraysh, they disagree with that, and they give Uthman the option of, listen, we cannot let your companions do it, but since you're here and we have a good relationship with you, you can go ahead and do Umrah. Uthman says, no way. You want me to go ahead and do Umrah or the Prophet and you don't let the Muslims and the Prophet do that? I'm not going to do it. So he eventually goes back. However, it takes him some time to get back. He's basically stuck there for some time. And then there's a rumor that goes on within the camp of the Muslims saying that Uthman is killed by the Quraysh, right? As soon as the Muslims find this out, then they immediately get into battle mode. Now, they're just 1,500 strong people. And then the Prophet takes them, and then he has them do a pledge, right? And this is called the Baytul Ridwan. And they're under a tree, and every single one of the Sahaba, all 1,500 of them, pledge to fight until death, to avenge the death of their companion, or the supposed death of their companion, Uthman radiallahu anhu. But finally, the truth comes out, and they find out that Uthman radiallahu anhu is safe and sound. He comes back. So now the Quraysh, they know that they're in a very, very precarious position. They want to basically somehow dispel the Muslims. They just don't want them to do Umrah. So Suhail bin Amr, right? Again, he's also not a Muslim at this time. He comes with a treaty, with a suggestion, right? And then finally, the conversation takes place, and then they settle down on a treaty. Now, I'll tell you the principles or the conditions of the treaty later, but before the treaty even starts, there happens to be a controversy right there, right? So Prophet starts to dictate the treaty, and Ali radiallahu anhu is writing the treaty. So they start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So Suhail says, we don't know what this Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, say Bismika Allahumma. This is how we write it. The Prophet says, okay, we'll go ahead and do it. And the Muslims are, okay, we can't even write Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, right? And then the next thing he says, this is a treaty between Muhammad, the Prophet of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and between Suhail bin Amr. Suhail objects again. He says, listen, I don't know, I don't consider you the Prophet of Allah. If I thought that you're the Prophet of Allah, I wouldn't have fought you. So this isn't going to work. You're right, Muhammad bin Abdullah. At this point, Ali can't take it anymore. He says, no, I wrote Muhammad Rasulullah, I'm not going to rub it. I'm not going to erase it. And the Prophet himself, he erases that and then has him write Muhammad bin Abdullah. So this is just out of the love and the other that Ali radiallahu anhu had of the Prophet ﷺ, that he just couldn't get himself to erase that. But anyways, the treaty starts, and the treaty that happens is there are 5 conditions of the treaty, right? The first condition is for 10 years, right? The first condition is for 10 years, there's going to be no battle, right? No absolute peace between Quraysh and the Muslims. There's not going to be any battle, number 1. Number 2, if there's any person from Mecca who escapes to Medina, right? So if there's any renegades, you can say, who escape from Mecca to Medina, then, okay, so that's the second condition, right? The third condition is that Umrah is not going to happen this year. Umrah is going to happen next year, right? Umrah is going to happen next year, all right? And then the third and the fourth condition is whichever one of the tribes that are surrounding Mecca and Medina, whoever they want to join, they're able to join, right? Whether they're free to join either the Quraysh or they can ally with the Muslims. So these are basically the conditions of the treaty. Yeah, so these are the conditions of the treaty. And then I think the final condition you can say is when they come in unarmed next year, right? So again, there's not going to be any confrontation when they come in for Umrah next year. So the Muslims are not really happy with this deal, right? They're looking at it. Number 1, they came in for the intentions of Umrah. They're not able to do Umrah. Number 2, they are supposed to return any Muslim that escapes and comes to Mecca, comes to Medina, back to the Meccans. And if a man from their place escapes, then they can't do it, right? So everything appears to be, for them, is like, what kind of deal is this, right? We just kind of gave the deal away. So as they're just thinking about this, something very amazing happens. The person, right, Suhail bin Amr, he's the guy who's making the deal, right? His own son is a Muslim, and he's actually chained and captured within Mecca. He escapes. His name is Abu Jandal. And I think this is amazing, actually. This is an amazing coincidence that happens, is the guy who's actually making the deal, his own son is a Muslim. Utter, you can say, helplessness, right? And he's chained. And now the Muslims are like seeing a fellow Muslim brother. And Umar even goes to a point where he takes his sword and he's like, hinting to Abu Jandal, take your sword, knock these people out, and come with us, right? But Abu Jandal doesn't take that cue, or doesn't decide to go on that route. The Prophet, he sees Abu Jandal and he says to his father Suhail, he says, listen, we haven't signed the treaty yet. Just give me this one man, and then the treaty will begin after this. But Suhail says, no, this is going to be your first return, right? We're going to see if you're going to be true to this treaty or not. So you are going to have to return it. The Prophet tells Abu Jandal, okay, just be patient. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take a way out for you. So he returns. Now the Muslims are going back and they're extremely upset. Umar goes to the Prophet and he says, Ya Rasulullah, are we not on the truth? Are you not the messenger of Allah? The Prophet calmly replies yes to both of them. He says, didn't you say that we're going to do Umrah this year? He said, did you say, are we not going to do Umrah? The Prophet said yes, but did I say that are we going to do Umrah this year? And that's a perfectly correct answer. He said, we're going to do Umrah. So he returns back and he asks the same question to Abu Bakr and he replies the same thing, right? But then finally the Prophet tells the Muslims, okay, now it's time to take our ihram out and shave our heads. But the Muslims are in such a state of shock, in spite of the Prophet telling that 3 times, they don't comply to that. Now the Prophet is like, in a sort of a bind. And then he goes inside and he consults his wife. And Salama radiallahu anha, she gives him the most amazing advice. She says, Ya Rasulullah, you don't have to tell them anything. You just go you slaughter your animal, you shave your head, you take your haram out, and they'll follow you. And that's exactly what happens. They, as soon as they see the Prophet and they follow. Now, even though the Treaty of Hudaybiyah appears to be at face value something that the Muslims basically made a treaty that was kind of lopsided in the favor of Quraysh, it really ends up being in their favor. Now, all the conditions that the Quraysh actually make, it backfires on them, right? So the first thing is they say, okay, you're gonna have to return any people that come to you. So there's a person by the name of Abu Basir, right? He escapes Makkah and he comes to Madinatul Munawwara as a Muslim, right? So Prophet again faithfully, according to the treaty, he says, no, you can't stay here. We made a treaty with them. You have to go back and we have to be patient. So 2 men come to collect him, and then they're taking him back. On the way back, Abu Basir, he kills one of them. He kills one of them and he runs back to Medina. The other one is he flees. The other person who's his captor flees. And then he tells the Prophet, you faithfully obeyed their treaty. You faithfully executed whatever the terms of the treaty was, but this is a breach from my side. So you're absolved of the treaty. The Prophet said, you're going to start a war. I can't do this. You're going to start a war. So when Abu Basir realizes, okay, the Muslims are not going to accept him. So he goes down and he basically stays at a place where any person who is coming out from Makkah, any Muslim who's coming out from Makkah, doesn't go to Medina, but goes and joins him. And Abu Jandal, the other Sahabi that we talked about, who was the son of Suhail bin Amr, he goes and joins him. So now they have a little band, a little army, and what they started to do is any of the Qurayshi caravans that are going to Syria or the other places. Now the Muslims can't attack them, right? Because they're in a peace treaty. They start attacking them, and it comes to a point where the Quraysh just go and beg the Muslims. They say, "Listen, take your people. They're just causing too much trouble to us. We're gonna strike that clause off that you can't keep the Muslims back, or you have to send the Muslims back. You don't have to do that. Anybody who wants to come and join you guys, that's totally fine." So that treaty is, that clause is struck, right? The next year, the Muslims come, and then they perform Umrah. And the Quraysh are now fuming, right? They leave the area, and the Muslims are now comfortably performing Umrah. And now they're able to, the people in Makkah are now able to see that these Muslims that we drove away have now done Umrah. And that kind of, the reputation of the Muslims now takes a new level, because now they've almost come in a victorious fashion, right? And then the relative peace, for 10 years, they say there's not going to be any war. The Muslims are now able to go and give dawah, right? People come in so many hordes and droves, tribes after tribe comes, and they've started, because now they have the option to join either Muslims or Quraysh, and then they see the akhlaq of the Muslims, they see the character of the Muslims, they meet the Prophet, they fall in love, and tribe after tribe starts accepting Islam. So eventually, it so happens that after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the number of Muslims who accept Islam are double the amount that had ever accepted Islam before. So even though at face value it appears that the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was a treaty that favored the Quraysh, it was actually a treaty that favored the Muslims. So after the Sulh of Hudaybiyah, there are two incidences that happen, right? Two major incidents that happen. So one of them is the conquest of Khaybar, right? Now, if you remember, the Jewish tribes that were driven out of Medina, they essentially go to another fortress of Jewish tribes that's called Khaybar, and there are a couple of forts, right? The Prophet ﷺ then goes on to deal with them, right? And then he makes a famous statement as they're marching to them, said, "Tomorrow I'm going to give this sword to the one who's going to liberate Khaybar, and he is going to be the one whom Allah and His Messenger love." So everybody is hopeful to be that person. And who gets that sword? Is Ali radiallahu anhu. So Khaybar is conquered. Again, there's a big story behind it. And eventually, there are different forts of Khaybar. They're conquered. Safiya radiallahu anhu is amongst the captives. And the Prophet frees her and he marries her. So Safiya radiallahu anhu becomes an Ummahat al-Mu'mineen. And then right around this time, Ja'far bin Abi Talib, who had been since all this time in Ethiopia, he returns. So the Prophet even makes a statement, "I don't know what I'm more happy about, whether the return of Ja'far from Ethiopia or from Abyssinia, or the conquest of Khaybar." So eventually, these are the few incidences that happen. And then after the conquest of Khaybar, the Prophet is also given poisoned meat. Now, of course, he doesn't die from it, but he's affected from that poison. So all of these incidences happen around this time between after Sulh Hudaybiyah. And the last thing that happens is the Battle of Mu'tah. The Battle of Mu'tah, even though Ja'far came after all these years, he passes away in the Battle of Mu'tah. The Battle of Mu'tah is an interesting battle that happens where a delegate of the Muslim, an ambassador of the Muslim is killed. And as he's killed, the Prophet sends 3,000 people under the leadership of Abdullah ibn Rawaha, Zayd bin Haritha, and Ja'far bin Abi Talib. So all three of them pass away. It's a very, very difficult battle. It's 3,000 people facing 100,000 people because the Roman army reinforces this tribe. But eventually those three Sahabis, they pass away. That really breaks the heart of the Prophet ﷺ, his beloved cousin, and then his beloved adopted son, Zayd bin Haritha, and then Abdullah bin Rawaha, they pass away. Then after that is the incidents of Fateh Makkah. Inshallah, hopefully we'll be able to cover Fateh Makkah today. So now, if you remember, the treaty of Hudaybiyah was there is going to be absolute peace, right? Nobody's going to attack each other. However, from the side of the Quraysh, this treaty is broken. How is that? There's a tribe called Khuza, and another tribe that is an ally of the Quraysh attacks the tribe of Khuza. And when that happens, technically it's a breach. It's a breach. Abu Sufyan, as soon as he finds this out, he runs to Medina. He runs to Medina Munawwara, and he wants to go and he wants to say, oh, Muhammad, we're not responsible for this breach of treaty. And you have to absolve this. Right? You have to let this go. The Prophet does not respond to him. Then he goes to Abu Bakr, he goes to Umar, he goes to Ali. None of them respond to him. None of them respond to him. Then he goes to his own daughter, Habiba, anhu, who happens to be one of the wives of the Prophet. And even she doesn't give him any, you can say, any respite. So she says, he tries to sit. He goes to the house and he tries to sit on the carpet, and she doesn't let him sit there, saying that you are not worthy of sitting on the carpet of the Prophet. So he's shocked at the attitude of his own daughter, shocked at the attitude of the Muslims. Again, at this point, the Quraysh are at fault. So he runs back to Medina, to Makkah al-Mukarramah, and now he's warning the people that the Muslims are probably going to attack. So Prophet now comes back with 10,000 men, right? So if you remember, 10,000 men were the same amount of men that came to attack Medina in the Battle of Zab. And now the Prophet has 10,000 Muslims who are now going to attack Makkah al-Mukarramah. Not necessarily attack, but going there to conquer Makkah. So now Abbas radiallahu anhu, who finally comes and joins the Prophet. He's from the beginning, he's on the side of Prophet, but now he formally accepts Islam, right? Now Abu Sufyan wants to prevent the Makkans from being completely slaughtered, right? He knows that if there is absolutely no way that the Makkans can face 10,000 people. So he's trying to convince people, and the people are not listening. They're like, no, how can we let Muhammad and his followers come and do this? So finally, he goes out and he meets Abbas radiallahu anhu. He meets Abbas radiallahu anhu, and Abbas radiallahu anhu, he takes him to the Prophet. Now, this is actually a very dangerous move for Abu Sufyan, because if anybody catches him, because they're now in a state of war, right? If anybody catches him, he would have gotten killed. But Abbas radiallahu anhu takes him to the Prophet, and the Prophet, rebukes him and says, Abu Sufyan, how long are you going to continue to fight? And do you not see the truth of Islam? So Abu Sufyan finally, at that time, he relents and he accepts the deen. And he tells Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib, when he sees 10,000 people, and he says, your nephew, he has done well, meaning his kingdom has fared well. And Abbas says, this is not kingdom, this is prophethood. This is not kingdom, but this is prophethood. But the Prophet announces as he's coming to Makkah, and now they're coming with multiple battalions, right? Each of them is led by a different Sahabi. Khalid bin Walid, who after the lesser Umrah, he comes and joins the Prophet. He is leading now, as a Muslim, one of the cavalries of the Muslims, right? So even at this point, there are a couple of people in Makkah who are still not wanting to accept Islam, and one of them is Ikrimah bin Abi Jahl, and we covered his story in detail. He escapes, and then his wife goes on, he comes back, and one by one, as the Prophet is now entering Makkah al-Mukarramah, everybody's petrified. Everybody's petrified, because imagine, these are the same people who tortured the people of Muslim. They tortured the Muslims, they stole their properties, they killed their parents, they killed their loved ones. They fought with them in Badr and Uhud and Khandaq, and now they're coming under absolute control. The Muslims are coming under absolute control, and the Makkans are completely petrified. And then the Prophet asks, what do you expect of me? And they say, O noble brother, O son of a noble brother, we expect nothing but good from you. Prophet at that point, he says, "La tathriba alaykum al-yawm." I'm going to tell you what Yusuf alayhi salam told to his brothers. There is no blame upon you. Anybody who's within the haram is free. Anybody who's within the house of Abu Sufyan is free. So anybody who's within the houses is safe. So Prophet makes that statement, and then the Makkans are now seeing the Muslims come, and they are amazed at their generosity, at their mercy, that in spite of them hurting the Muslims for all these years, they are absolutely, there's a display of complete composure and complete mercy from the sides of the Muslims. So there are a few people that are even within Makkah. The Prophet names 9 people that have committed crimes, beyond any forgiveness. So in spite of that, 5 of those people are forgiven. 5 of those people are forgiven. Amongst them is Ikramah bin Abi Jahl, Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan, who desecrates in spite of doing something, desecrating the body of the uncle of the Prophet, Hamza. She is forgiven. Wahshi, the one who assassinated Hamza, he's also forgiven. So all these people are forgiven, and the Prophet essentially then conquers Makkah, and then he goes to the Kaaba. He goes to the Kaaba, and one by one, the 360 idols that are within the Kaaba, he knocks them all down. The Kaaba is cleansed of all the filth, and once again, the message of Tawheed, the message of Islam, the message of the truth of Islam is declared from the rooftop of the Kaaba by none other than Bilal radiallahu anhu. And the Makkans are looking at this, and for them, it's incomprehensible that a slave, a black slave, it would go up to the Kaaba, and he would be the announcer and the proclaimer of this message. And now, even though not all of them have become Muslims, but they are very, very impressed. They're very, very awestruck by the generosity of the Muslims, by the character of the Muslims. And this ends the chapter of Fateh Makkah. Now, Prophet is inside Makkah, and there are a couple of other things that happen right after Fateh Makkah. And then tomorrow, inshallah, we'll cover the Battle of Hunain, Taif, Tabuk. Again, that will be probably not as detailed. And then we'll go on to the farewell pilgrimage. Again, inshallah, the entire goal was to give a snapshot of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. I'm not sure how effective that was, but what I plan to do tomorrow, inshallah, is hopefully we'll end early. I plan not to be as detailed with those last few battles, but the goal, once again, which was our initial goal, is how can we remember the entire seerah of the Prophet ﷺ in a short diagram, if you will. So we'll go through that once again, maybe in 15 minutes. We'll try to go through that. Pretty much a summary of everything as to from the birth of Prophet ﷺ till the farewell Hajj. How can we divide his life, and then how can we remember? Because some of the things, again, as I'm mentioning details, that it's becoming too detailed. But if we break it down to the Meccan period and the Medinan period, and then we break it down to pre-Hudaybiyah, post-Hudaybiyah, it'll become easier. So inshallah, we'll have a sort of a roadmap, if you will, of the life of the Seerah Prophet ﷺ, and hopefully that will help us and aid us in remembering the life of the Prophet ﷺ, in one goal. So inshallah, we'll meet tomorrow, which will be our last session. Jazakumullah khair again for joining. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to study the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ again and again in our life. May He subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the love of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions. And may He subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to follow them, and finally join us and connect us with the noble company in the hereafter. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah khair.